What if I told you that buried underneath your most passionate expressions of love is a quiet longing for death? Sounds insane, right? But Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, didn't think so. In fact, he believed that the very force that drives you to fall in love is in constant tension with an inner urge to destroy yourself. Not metaphorically, literally. According to Freud, every kiss, every obsession, every romantic craving is secretly entangled with a hidden death wish. Love, he said, isn't just about connection. It's also about control, power, and the terrifying desire to return to nothingness, to the silence before you were born. He called it the death drive, thanatos, a subconscious force that competes with our instinct to survive. It doesn't just show up in suicidal thoughts. It disguises itself in addiction, obsession, toxic relationships, even in your most romantic moments. Freud's theory wasn't just controversial. It was terrifying, because it suggests that behind the way we love is something darker, something self-destructive. And maybe, just maybe, the people we're drawn to are the ones who mirror our own silent war between passion and annihilation. This isn't just theory. It's a psychological lens into real relationships and why some people fall deeply in love, only to destroy each other. And once you hear the rest of it, you'll never look at love the same way again. If you're fascinated by the darker side of the mind and want to explore how Freud's most disturbing ideas still echo in your own thoughts, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks they understand love. Trust me, they don't. Not yet. The hidden forces behind love. You think you know why you fall in love. Maybe it's chemistry, maybe shared interests, or that unexplainable magnetic pull toward someone who just feels right. But Freud would have laughed at that. To him, love wasn't innocent. It wasn't even romantic. It was instinctual, raw, and deeply psychological. Behind every heartbeat, every gaze, every word spoken in desire, was a force he called eros, the life drive. At first glance, eros sounds beautiful, the instinct to survive, to grow, to connect. But Freud didn't mean it in a poetic way. For him, eros wasn't about poetry. It was about power. He believed love was the mind's strategy to bind us to life, to others, and to reproduction. It was nature's trick to keep the species going. But here's where it gets dark. Freud argued that this drive, this need to love, wasn't pure. It was selfish, obsessive, possessive. We don't just want to be close to someone. We want to consume them, to merge, to own, to control. Think about it. That couple that can't spend a minute apart. The one who checks your messages every hour. The partner who says, if I can't have you, no one can. That's not love. That's eros twisted. And here's where the first disturbing truth creeps in. According to Freud, the more intensely we love, the more we flirt with destruction. Because the life drive doesn't just build, it binds. And anything that binds too tightly eventually crushes. Why do so many love stories end in pain? Why does passion so often lead to jealousy, rage, and obsession? Freud believed it's because love awakens our deepest fears, of abandonment, of losing control, of not being enough. And to protect ourselves, we cling harder. We overcompensate. We suffocate the very thing we want to preserve. It's a paradox. The more you try to hold on, the more fragile love becomes. And yet, we return to it, again and again. Because eros isn't just about romance. It's about survival. Keeps us chasing connection, even when we know it might break us. Freud saw this play out in therapy rooms over and over. Clients trapped in destructive cycles of love and heartbreak. People who mistook pain for passion. Who thought jealousy meant commitment. Who confused control with affection. And he realized something chilling. Love isn't always a celebration of life. Sometimes, it's a cover for our deepest insecurities and our need to dominate, not connect. But this is only half the story. Because while eros tries to keep us alive through love, there's something else. Lurking, quietly pulling in the opposite direction. And Freud believed it was even stronger than the life drive. A force that doesn't want to connect, but destroy. Not to survive, but to return to stillness, silence, death. And it lives in all of us. The birth of the death drive. What if your mind isn't just trying to survive, but also trying to disappear? Freud didn't always believe this. For years, he thought human behavior was driven by one main force, eros, the life instinct. The desire to grow, love, create, reproduce. But over time, something didn't add up. He started noticing patterns in his patients, patterns that defied logic. People stuck in cycles of self-sabotage, repeating toxic relationships, returning to trauma, engaging in habits that brought pain, not pleasure. And no matter how much they claimed they wanted to be happy, they couldn't stop hurting themselves. That's when Freud introduced his most disturbing idea. He called it thanatos, the death drive, an invisible force deep in the psyche, driving people not toward life, but toward destruction. And not just destruction of others, but of the self. It was controversial. Even his closest followers rejected it. But Freud couldn't ignore what he was seeing. People unconsciously drawn to suffering, repetition, and even death. Not because they were weak, but because the mind itself carried a hidden desire to return to stillness, to zero, to before everything. Let that sink in. According to Freud, you might carry a buried instinct to die. Not consciously, not in a way you feel every day, but in quiet, hidden ways through procrastination, self-doubt, sabotaged relationships, addiction, avoidance, chronic guilt. Every time you ruin something good for no reason, every time you stay in pain longer than necessary, every time you replay the same trauma again and again, even when you swear you want to move on, that's not just bad luck or bad choices. Freud believed that's thanatos whispering. He saw it in war, in violence, in the compulsive repetition of trauma, in soldiers who returned from battle only to destroy their own families, in children who reenacted pain they barely remembered. He called it the repetition compulsion, our tendency to unconsciously recreate painful experiences, even if we hate them. Especially if we hate them. It's like the mind wants to master the pain, or at least control how it happens. But underneath that is something darker, an ancient pull toward undoing, toward silence, toward returning to the inorganic. Now here's the chilling part. Freud didn't think this death drive was evil. He thought it was natural. Just like gravity pulls objects to the ground, thanatos pulls the psyche toward stillness. Life is messy, chaotic, unstable. Death, predictable, quiet, peaceful. So part of your mind, the part you don't hear, might be longing for that return, for release from pressure, identity, failure, and effort. That doesn't mean you want to die, but it might explain why part of you resists living fully. And when this death drive collides with love, with passion, attachment, desire, that's when things get terrifying. Because now eros and thanatos are face to face. And only one can win. When love meets death, the collision. Imagine two forces inside you, one begging you to connect, to love, to feel alive, and the other quietly urging you to let go, to dissolve, to return to silence. Now imagine they both fall in love with the same person. That's what Freud saw in his most intense patients, not just love but war. A war between eros and thanatos, tangled in a single relationship. And it was never obvious at first. It looked like passion, like obsession, like the kind of love that consumes. But underneath, a desire to disappear inside another person, or to destroy them before they could destroy you. Freud believed that when these two drives collide, when the life drive and death drive meet in the same emotional space, the result is often chaos. Abuse, self-destruction, addiction, jealousy, emotional blackmail. Have you ever seen someone so in love they lose themselves completely? They stop caring about anything else. Their friends vanish. Their personality shrinks. They merge with their partner like they're disappearing. That's not just love. That's thanatos wearing eros as a mask. Or take the couple that fights constantly, screaming, blaming, breaking things, only to collapse into each other again. That push-pull dance of I love you, I hate you, I need you, I fear you. Freud would call this a neurotic bond, a relationship where Eros binds but Thanatos corrodes. Even sexual attraction, Freud noted, can carry this energy. The line between pleasure and aggression, between surrender and control, between connection and domination. Some of the deepest desires aren't just about closeness, they're about being undone. Why do some people cheat on the one person who loves them the most? Why do we sometimes destroy the very thing we prayed for? Because Thanatos doesn't show up with a warning. It blends into your thoughts. It hides inside your longing. Tells you that chaos is passion, and that hurting is caring. Freud believed that this tension between Eros and Thanatos is what makes love so dangerous and so addictive. One part of you wants to be seen, held, nurtured. The other wants to be shattered, devoured, forgotten. And the tragic part? We often seek partners who unconsciously match this inner battle. You might be drawn to someone who triggers your need to merge and your urge to disappear, or someone whose love feels just dangerous enough to keep you hooked. We call it chemistry. Freud called it repetition. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. The slow erosion of self, the quiet resentment, the distance that grows even in the name of closeness. Because when love becomes a battleground between life and death, no one leaves untouched. And in many relationships, the war never ends. Real cases of passion and destruction. Freud didn't invent these theories out of thin air. He pulled them from observation, sometimes shocking, sometimes heartbreaking, but always disturbingly human. Let's begin with one of his most haunting case studies. A woman, brilliant and accomplished, kept returning to a partner who humiliated her. Publicly, privately, over and over. She knew it was toxic. She cried about it in therapy. She could explain exactly why it was bad, yet she couldn't leave. Freud didn't call it weakness. He called it repetition compulsion, the death drive looping in disguise. Her subconscious wasn't seeking love. It was seeking familiar pain, the same pattern of emotional rejection she experienced from her distant father as a child. It wasn't about happiness. It was about control. If she could master the pain this time, maybe it would finally hurt less. Didn't. And this isn't rare. Look at the infamous case of Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen. Their relationship was passionate, drug-fueled, obsessive, and ultimately fatal. Their love was loud, chaotic, and tragically fused with self-destruction. It wasn't a coincidence. It was textbook Thanatos. Eros brought them together. Thanatos tore them apart. And it's not just rock stars. There's the successful executive who repeatedly sabotaged every stable relationship he entered, chasing people who were emotionally unavailable. Every time things got safe, he'd pull away or create drama. Why? Because peace felt foreign, and destruction felt like home. Or the newlywed couple who couldn't stop fighting during their honeymoon. On the surface, they were in love, but underneath, both were acting out fears of abandonment from different childhood wounds, and were unconsciously trying to test each other's limits. That's the danger Freud warned us about. When unresolved trauma fuses with romantic attachment, the relationship becomes a battleground. Not because the other person is the enemy, but because your own mind becomes the war zone. It's the therapist hearing, "I love him, but I also hate him," or "I don't feel alive unless we're fighting." It's the person who keeps attracting partners who cheat, or control, or abandon, and then swears, "This time will be different." But the script doesn't change, because the drive beneath the surface hasn't changed. And here's the most chilling part. Freud believed we're not just accidentally drawn to these patterns. We're pulled to them like a moth to flame, because they mirror our inner conflict. They let us reenact the war but when we finally recognize the pattern, when we see the death drive for what it is, we get a choice. Repeat it, or break it. Why this still matters. Love, death, and you. Freud died in 1939. But his most disturbing idea, that love and death are secretly entangled, feels more alive today than ever. Look around. How many people chase love, only to fall into the same emotional traps? How often do relationships swing between obsession and emptiness? How many times do we ask, "Why do I keep choosing people who hurt me?" That's not just a coincidence. It's programming. See, the death drive isn't some spooky Freudian myth. It shows up in modern psychology too, just under different names. Self-sabotage, trauma bonding, maladaptive coping, attachment wounds, different languages, same core truth. Part of your mind wants to stay in pain, not because you enjoy it, but because it's familiar, safe, predictable. And Freud would say that's Thanatos. You might know someone, or be someone, who always pulls away when things get good, who starts fights when closeness gets too real, who chooses chaos over calm, even if they say they want peace. And maybe they do want peace, but another part of them is terrified by it. Because peace means letting go of the war they've always known. It means facing the possibility that love doesn't have to hurt. That's a terrifying idea, when all you've ever known is pain. Here's the uncomfortable truth Freud left us with. The deepest parts of you are at war. One part wants to live, love, build, heal. The other wants to unravel. Quietly, slowly. Disguised as bad luck, or just how I am. So what do you do with that? You look closer. When you feel drawn to someone, ask why. Is it a connection, or compulsion? When you sabotage something good, pause. Is that your intuition, or your fear of being seen? When you find yourself chasing the same pain again and again, stop. Ask what part of you is still reenacting an old script, hoping for a different ending. Because awareness is your only weapon in this quiet war. Freud didn't give us easy answers, but he gave us something better, a way to look underneath the surface, to question our instincts, to see that not everything we call love is actually love, and not every act of destruction is an accident. Sometimes the people we're drawn to the most are the ones who reflect the part of us we're afraid to face. And until we face it, we stay caught in patterns, in pain, in the illusion that we're choosing love when really we're chasing a beautifully disguised death. But once you see it, you can interrupt it. You can choose connection over chaos, presence over patterns, eros over thanatos, and maybe, for the first time, love that doesn't hurt,